His Excellency, President Professor Bingu wa Mutharika, and the First Lady, Kalista Mutharika. You may all be seated. It is my singular honor and privilege to welcome all of you here today, and our special guest, His Excellency Professor Bingu wa Mutharika, the President of the Republic of Malawi, the Chairperson of the African Union, and his lovely and brilliant First Lady, the Honorable Kalista Mutharika. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, students, and faculty, as the Director of the African Presidential Archives and Research Center at Boston University, it is my honor to welcome you to this afternoon's lecture and video conference featuring President Mutharika. Before we begin this afternoon's program, I would like to invite you all to begin eating, which I already encouraged a bit earlier, and to enjoy each other's company. We will resume forthwith with our program. Bon appetit. There are a number of folks that I want to recognize. Let me, first of all, start with my colleagues at BU in event planning who work with us in terms of pulling this together. Let's give them a round of applause. Likewise, we have a number of BU faculty members and administrators present, and I'd like them to stand. Let's give them a round of applause. Our colleagues, those who contribute so much to the administration and pedagogical mission of this great institution. And I'd like to recognize the students. My class, the class that I teach on Africa and globalization, are here in mass. But we also have other students here and in the foyer, and let's all of the students stand, because at the end of the day, this is what this is about. Here, here. I would like to recognize, if I might, members of the President's Cabinet who are traveling with him. The Honorable Professor Edabanda, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, please stand. The Honorable Dr. George Champonda, the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. The Honorable Abi Shawa, the Minister of Development Planning and Cooperation. The Honorable Teresa Mwale, the Minister of Gender. And the Honorable Ambassador Steve Matinje, the Malawian ambassador to the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, we would now like to begin the video conference and lecture portion of today's program. There is one other point of recognition that I want to make. City Councilor Charles Yancey presented earlier a resolution from the City of Boston acknowledging President Mutharika's and the First Lady's presence here in Boston, and we appreciate that. Here, give them a round of applause for that. Am I now ready to introduce Greg Gottlieb? Allow me to introduce Greg Gottlieb, who's the Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator of the United States Agency for International Development, the Bureau of Food Security. Mr. Gottlieb most recently served as mission director in Namibia for USAID for 2 years. Prior to his assignment in Namibia in 2008, he served as Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator of USAID's Bureau for Democracy, Conflict, and Humanitarian Assistance. He has more than 25 years of experience with the United States government, non-governmental organizations, and the UN, primarily in the field of humanitarian relief. Now, were it not enough for the portfolio that he has carried and carries presently, it is also a unique and special feature that he has more than a passing acquaintance with the Republic of Malawi, having served as the disaster response coordinator in Malawi in 1988. We're very pleased not only to have him present to bring greetings and brief remarks, but we also want to acknowledge that this initiative is a part of a 4-year cooperative agreement that we have with USAID, a relationship of which we're most proud. So if you're ready, Greg, we'll hear from you presently.
It's a pleasure. I just want to acknowledge Your Excellency, Bingu Mutharika, President of Malawi, and Robert Brown, the President of Boston University. It's a great pleasure for us to be here and to be able to participate with you and with everyone around the world. I think this is a very unique opportunity for us to talk a little bit about our new Feed the Future initiative, and also to hear from you as to what your concerns are in various parts of the world. So you may have heard that President Obama announced a presidential policy directive on global development last week to spell out strategic objectives and the core approach to development of this administration. This is the first ever global development policy directive from a U.S. president and shows that the administration is committed to making development a core pillar of American foreign policy. One of the major groundbreaking development initiatives under this administration is Feed the Future, the U.S. government's global hunger and food security initiative. The spike in world food prices in 2008 destabilized local and national economies across the world and revealed the urgent need for the international community to make greater investments in agriculture as a proven tactic for combating food insecurity and as an engine for broader economic growth, prosperity, and stability. I think it's probably worth noting that prior to when food prices spiked, they are still only down to half of where they were then in 2008, but far above where they were before 2008. Can people hear us? I hope they can. And through Feed the Future, we will invest $3.5 billion over 3 years to sustainably reduce poverty and hunger through agricultural development. Our efforts are just one part of a global effort launched at the G20 in London in March of 2009 to reverse decades of declining support for agricultural development. The strategy for Feed the Future recognizes that food security is not just about food, but it is also closely linked to economic security, environmental security, and human security. A key component of both the new Global Development Policy Directive and of Feed the Future is the importance of country ownership and investing in country-led plans. As embodied in the Paris Declaration, the Accra Agenda for Action, and the Rome Principles, country ownership provides the most effective means to coordinate development efforts and achieve sustainability. Through Feed the Future, we are expanding our government's commitment to aligning our investments with partner countries' priorities and increasing our own transparency and accountability. Similar to the Global Health Initiative, Feed the Future intends to make long-term, large-scale investments in a small number of partner countries to concentrate our resources on the approaches we know work well. Another key area of focus that may be of particular interest to those in the academic world is research. Agricultural research not only increases agricultural productivity, but also increases income to purchase food and affects the quality of food consumed. From my own experience working on the Food Security Task Force some years ago, we know that we had diminished our investments in agricultural research. So it's really with great pleasure that I think we refocus some of our efforts and some of our funding in that area so that we can start anew start some new things in the agricultural area. The Green Revolution demonstrated the tremendous human and societal impacts associated with productivity gains. As a result of lower real prices, families not only could purchase adequate food daily, they could devote savings to school fees, clinic visits, and reinvest in their farms. Achieving similar transformative advances in Africa and other regions where high levels of hunger and poverty persist is central to the Feed the Future objectives. The U.S. will devote an estimated 9% of investment resources for Feed the Future to purpose-driven research agenda aimed at solving problems facing smallholder farmers. This investment will be multiplied by host nation investments and by the efforts of partners around the globe. Research priorities reflect local assessment of problems and needs, as well as the feasibility of and opportunity for agricultural research to make a difference. Across Africa, the bottom-up processes underpinning CATUP have been fully taken into account. Partnership with local, national, and regional organizations is integral to achieving Feed the Future goals and is central to the country-driven nature of the initiative. Your Excellency, President Mutharika, President Brown, and Ambassador Stith, I am really pleased to be able to participate in this event today and this exchange of views, and I look forward to hearing from you and from folks around the world what's on their mind in terms of this new exciting avenue in food security. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing from everyone.
Greg, thank you. Before I introduce our president, I would like to acknowledge the First Lady of Boston University, Dr. Beverly Brown. Please stand and give her a round of applause. Here, here. I would now like to welcome Boston University's president, Dr. Robert Brown, to the podium. Bob is a distinguished scholar and innovative leader in higher education. He became the 10th president of Boston University in September 2005. He's a Texas native, earned his BS and MS degrees in chemical engineering at the University of Texas in Austin, and received his PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Minnesota. He's a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the National Academy of Engineering, and the National Academy of Sciences, among other professional societies. At Boston University, Dr. Brown has emphasized strengthening the core missions of undergraduate, graduate, and professional education, interdisciplinary work, and research and scholarship across all 17 schools and colleges of Boston University. He initiated an 18-month planning process that culminated in a 10-year strategic plan, Choosing to Be Great. Dr. Brown has worked to underscore the central importance of teaching and research functions at our university, with a particular emphasis on efforts to increase opportunities for interdisciplinary study by students from all of the university's undergraduate schools and colleges. Dr. Brown is actively engaged in both the public and private sectors. He has served as a director of the DuPont Company since April 2007, since 2008 as a trustee of the Aalto University Foundation, a new model for university governance in Finland, and most recently, he was appointed a trustee of the university's Research Association. Prior to his appointment at Boston University, Dr. Brown served as provost and the Warren K. Lewis Professor of Chemical Engineering at the Massachusetts, let's look right across the water over here. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He joined that faculty in 1979. He's well published, extremely well versed, and we are happy that he's the leader of this esteemed and distinguished institution. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Robert Brown.
Is there any time for the speaker? Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Ambassador Stith, for your kind introduction. And you get to apologize to His Excellency about cutting his speech in half with the introduction. I really would like to start out by thanking Charles and his staff of the African Presidential Archives and Research Center at Boston University for organizing today's event. It is a testament to both Boston University and APARC's ongoing efforts that His Excellency has selected Boston University as the site for today's remarks. Boston University has more than a 55-year history of excellence in the field of African studies, and it's with pride and honor that I welcome His Excellency to our campus. Dr. Bingu Mutharika, President of the Republic of Malawi and Chairperson of the African Union, is a distinguished international economist and diplomat. He holds a doctorate of philosophy and development economics from Pacific Western University in Los Angeles, California, and a master's in economics and Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Delhi in India. He has high-level management experience, having served as administrative officer for the governments of Malawi and Zambia, as Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of Malawi and Minister of Economic Planning and Development. He also has worked in the World Bank and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa as Director for Trade and Development Finance, and as Secretary General of the Common Market of Eastern and Southern Africa. Professor Mutharika is the president of the ruling Democratic Progress Party in Malawi, the founder and chairman of the Beneth Trust, a non-profit organization promoting education, the founder and chairman of the Bingu Silvergray Foundation for the Elderly, an organization promoting welfare of the elderly and retired persons, and founder and president of the University of Southern Malawi. He has received many awards, including the 2010 Special Award of Millennium Development Goals and the 2009 Medal of Glory Award by the Foundation for Democracy in Africa. He is also a prolific scholar and writer on the development in Africa. His books include the forthcoming book, The African Dream, From Poverty to Prosperity Toward Multinational, that's the first one, The African Dream, From Poverty to Prosperity, Towards Multinational Economic Cooperation in Africa, which was published in 1972, and One Africa, One Destiny, published in 1994. He is also the author of a dozen papers on international trade, development finance, and African regional economic integration. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor that I introduce His Excellency, Dr. Bingu Mutharika.
You know, the advantage of being a president and also being old is that you can decide to sit down while you're addressing people. So I take advantage of that and I'll address you while sitting down because I expect also to have a number of questions from all over the world. So clearly, if I were to stand up, my legs will get shorter by the time I finish. Excellency, the First Lady of Malawi, Mr. Deval Patrick, Governor of the State of Massachusetts, Dr. Robert Brown, President of the Boston University, and Mrs. Brown, Ambassador Charles Stith, Director of the African Presidential Archives and Research Center, and Mrs. Stith, Honorable Ministers from Malawi, distinguished university faculty members. I also welcome this afternoon the Vice Chancellors of the University of Ghana and Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, where I think we are hooked this morning. Also the principals of the Elizabeth City College in North Carolina and Morehouse in Georgia, whom also I understand are hooked to this program. And of course, the students of Boston University and the other universities that are participating in this program. I also like to take advantage to thank the United States USAID for supporting this program and for being a part of this process. We thank them very much. I am delighted to be with you today on this very important forum and for us to share the vision of a new Africa. Let me also thank Mr. Deval Patrick, the governor of the state of Massachusetts, for warmly welcoming us last night. I'm grateful to Ambassador Charles Stiff, Executive Director of the African Presidential Archives and Research Center, for taking this initiative. It has taken a long time and a lot of persistence for him to manage to bring me here, because I've been on the road for the whole month of September, but still I managed to be here. So I'm grateful that you did, because being in Boston is like being in Malawi, because the people are very friendly. In Malawi, we are the warm heart of Africa. I bring to you warm and fraternal greetings from the people of Malawi and also from the people of Africa. I'm here today to discuss with you not the Africa of calamities and endemic poverty, but a new Africa of hope and opportunities. I want to discuss with you not widespread food shortages, hunger, and malnutrition, but how Africa can produce enough food to feed its people as well as the rest of the world. I brought to you today the message of a new Africa, the Africa of a new beginning. I brought to you news that Africa has shifted from Afro-pessimism to Afro-optimism. I'm saying this because hitherto the Africa you have been made to know is the Africa of insensate calamities, the Africa of endemic diseases such as HIV and AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, the Africa where many children die before the age of 5 years, the Africa of conflicts, of terrorism, of piracy, of corruption, and indeed the Africa of underdevelopment. Yes, this is Africa you have been made to know, and this Africa exists. But I want you now to begin to know a new Africa. This is the Africa of new hopes, new opportunities, Africa of increased investment opportunities, the Africa where the above diseases are being brought under control and infant mortality is significantly reducing, the Africa where extreme poverty is being tackled head-on, the Africa's war on these and other calamities is on and is being won. Yes, this is the Africa I want you to know, because that Africa also exists. It is true that Africa and the rest of the world face several challenges in the quest to improve the lives and welfare of humanity. These challenges include wars, conflicts, terrorism, food shortages, escalating food prices, imbalances in global trade and prosperity, inequities in investment and development opportunities, climate change, and environmental degradation, and endemic diseases such as HIV and AIDS. These problems are real, and they do retard progress, and we have to tackle them. There's now an emerging consensus that one of the biggest challenges facing humanity is how to feed over 9 billion people in the world today. In Africa, the challenge is also how to reduce extreme poverty and hunger facing millions of people. Therefore, I have chosen to introduce to you today the African food basket, which are innovations, interventions, and strategic partnerships. This is a mega investment project that will involve all African countries and envisage the purchase of tractors, agricultural implements, irrigation equipment, fertilizers, manures, seeds, cement for dam construction, water pumps, pipes, trucks for transportation. When implemented, this will create thousands and thousands of jobs and self-employment business opportunities at various levels. I will start by stating that upon the assumption of the African Union chairmanship during the 14th ordinary session of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the African Union that was held in Addis Ababa early this year, I proposed, and the African heads of state unanimously agreed, that within a period of 5 years, Africa must be able to feed itself. I also proposed that after that period, no child in Africa should die of hunger, starvation, or malnutrition. I persuaded the African governments to place the highest priority on agriculture and food security as a basis for economic transformation and change. They agreed that the continent of Africa should be turned into an African food basket through specific innovations, interventions, and strategic partnerships. They also agreed that Africa should be able to supply food to the rest of the world. The rationale is that I'm convinced that if African governments could invest enough or allocate enough budgetary resources in agriculture, the continent could produce enough food for all. Therefore, the consensus was that the next 2 to 3 years, sustainable growth and development in African countries will be determined by what happens in the agricultural sector. The other rationale was that presently only 10% of arable land in Africa is under cultivation. In other words, Africa has vast unutilized land, 90% of land that could be brought to produce more food for Africa and the rest of the world. But this is not all. There is also evidence by the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, of the United Nations, that shows that sub-Saharan African countries lose about 40% of their food after harvest. You can imagine that. After you have brought the food into your home, you lose 40%. Now, in terms of bags, let's say bags of 50 kgs each, it means that out of every 100 bags, you lose 40 bags. You have only 60 bags that you use. And this is compared with less than 1% for North America, United States, and Southeast Asia. Therefore, I firmly believe that if this amount of food that we are losing now were to be saved, the food situation in Africa would significantly improve, even without growing 1 more hectare of land for food. In addition, we have evidence of success stories in food self-sufficiency in Africa, and of countries that are able to produce enough food to feed their people. These include Egypt, Sudan, Malawi, South Africa, Ghana, Senegal, Morocco, Algeria, and Cameroon, to name only a few. The point we are making is that it is possible for people to produce enough food to feed themselves. And indeed, at Africa level, it's even that much possible. We are going to press on irrigation development. We have a lot of rivers, lakes, and swamps in Malawi and the rest of Africa that can be converted into, turned into food after irrigation. Presently, only 7% of the African arable land is irrigated. The potential of irrigation for Africa is therefore enormous, and it is estimated that we can bring up to 42 million hectares of land under irrigation within the next 5 years. In order to ensure sustainable food security, the African Union also decided on 3 other key priorities to spur development and to rescue people out of poverty. And these are not only agriculture and food security, but also transport and communications infrastructure, and energy development, as well as management of climate change. The African Food Basket Initiative is therefore a new focused approach that highlights agriculture and food security as the springboard for growth. It calls for Africa and all cooperating partners to focus on improving agriculture and food security in the next 5 years through brave innovations. The innovations that can be introduced are many, but here let me just mention a few. Firstly, the first proposal is to introduce subsidies to smallholder agricultural farmers. I know this is the bone of contention. The Washington consensus says you stop all subsidies. And I'm saying, in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, much of agriculture is done by small people, mainly women. A woman with a baby on her back, working until midday or past midday, no food, no water. Washington says they should not have subsidies. But that in the industrialized countries, with advanced, modernized agriculture, tractors, sometimes I understand even air-conditioned tractors, with stereo music, the Washington consensus says those should have subsidies, but my poor African women should not. And I said, that's where we part ways. And I can tell you that subsidies have worked very well for Malawi, and they can work for other countries. It is impossible, those of you who know Africa, it's impossible to expect that these smallholder farmers can produce beyond subsistence without subsidies. Simply is not possible. But let me tell you, 2 weeks ago, several women came to see me to thank me for what they've done. And they told me that for all their lives, on their small plots of land, they were never able to produce more than 2-3 bags of maize of 50 kgs. But after introducing the subsidies, one of them says, I have 15 bags of maize. Another one says, I have 17 bags of maize. Another one says, I have 20 bags of maize. Now, what does that mean? That means that they have now gone beyond subsistence. That means now they are able not only to feed themselves throughout the year, but to find surplus for marketing, and therefore their incomes improve. Now, can someone come under those circumstances and convince me that we need no subsidies? Can you be convinced that we don't need subsidies? I think we do. The second policy intervention, as I said, is through the investment in irrigation facilities. We are looking at a number of dams, earth dams, all over the place to enable smallholder farmers not only to irrigate their crops, but to feed their livestock and even to get drinking water. So we're having new irrigation initiatives, and we want them to be replicated throughout Africa. We'll use the experiences in countries such as Egypt, Libya, and Sudan that have managed to feed themselves even without rain in some areas for several years. So we believe this can be done, and we believe this will enhance the realization of the African Green Revolution. I've mentioned transport and communications earlier on because it's very important. It's important for the African food basket because we are going to produce a lot of food. And indeed, it doesn't make sense for you to produce food if you cannot transport it from the surplus areas to the deficit areas. So it makes a lot of sense. But that's also another area of investment where private sector can actually benefit. So we'll need new partnerships in the area of transport and infrastructure, particularly emphasizing the private sector. There are a lot of opportunities. I don't have details to say so, but my statement, when you get it, you'll be able to find the details where these investments occur. Then in the area of energy development, I like to argue the case for energy as an important aspect of achieving and sustaining the African food basket. Here, we need to recognize that energy is fundamental in the development of not only agriculture, but industry, particularly agro-processing. And therefore, we would also be using energy as part of the package in promoting food security. We have also the issue of climate change. Africa is very severely affected by climate change. Sadly, Africa has not contributed to the global warming, but we are least able to protect ourselves. And therefore, as part of package of food security and overall development, we need to look at climate change, how we manage climate change, how we do afforestation programs, how we utilize rivers to ensure that water doesn't run through, how we make sure that we can conserve soil. There are areas like Ambassador Stith was telling us in Haiti, for instance, where because there are no trees, that's we learned when we were out there that because there are no trees, when the rain hits on the ground, it just washes away the entire soil. So right now, for instance, in Haiti, there's hardly any soil on which to grow anything. That is happening also in other parts of Africa. And we want to stop that, control the flow of water, control the flow of the loss of soil. And this will be one of the things in which the African food basket can be done. I believe we have the means, we have the technology, we have the expertise, we have also the experience in various countries, not only in Africa, but the rest of the world, to deal with this problem. Let me now turn to the issue of information and communications technology. During the past 20 years or so, the world has moved at a tremendous speed in communication and information technology. We have e-government, e-commerce, e-finance, e-banking, e-medicine, e-education. I don't know what is not e now. So therefore, it's important for Africa also to move e somewhere. And indeed, in terms of agriculture and food security, we need to know, we intend to use information and communication technology to find out what are the staple diets of many African countries, which countries eat what, and then see if some of those staple diets can be grown even in areas or countries where it's not a staple food for that country, but on all Africa basis. So we are looking at, through information and communication technology, we are looking at food security not at national level only, but also at sub-regional level, at African level. But beyond that, we want to look at food security at global level, because Africa cannot be happy if other parts of the world are suffering. And for your information, recently Malawi did send 200 metric tons of rice to Haiti, and we're able to do that. On the climate change, what we need, again, using information and communication technology, is for us to find out what are the best practices, how other countries have managed to control deforestation, have managed to control salination. You know, many countries are now facing, because of global warming, many islands around Africa and the rest of the world are threatened. Some of them might disappear. I was talking to a colleague from Maldives, and they were saying that if nothing is done to Maldives, 20 years from now, Maldives will disappear from the face of the earth. So it is a serious problem. It is a serious problem, and we need a response. And that's why Africa is quite concerned that although climate change has been recognized, the movement towards the solution of this crisis is not really as fast as it should be. The Copenhagen Conference on Climate Change was a failure, and we are saddened by that. We are looking forward to the Cancun. There will be Cancun meeting in December on the same thing. We hope that the developed countries will come forward and have a concrete program, because a disaster anywhere in the part of the world is a disaster for all of us. So in order to have the African food basket, I have proposed and I've created what I call the strategic group of 17. We have picked up 17 African countries based on our knowledge of how they've managed food security and agriculture, to spearhead and to talk to the G8 and other countries on how best we can turn Africa into a food basket. These countries include Egypt, Sudan, Senegal, South Africa, Malawi, Uganda, Tanzania, Ghana, Ethiopia, Algeria, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Liberia, Cameroon, Mozambique, and Mali. We will be having a meeting at the summit level, also at the ministerial level, at the official level, and even at the private sector level, to say together, what can we do to turn Africa into a food basket? And we'll also be linking with the G8 countries to tap on the L'Aquila initiative, where the G8 countries set aside $20 billion United States dollars for agriculture and food security. So, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot present the whole of my statement tonight because it will be a long one, and we are waiting to hear from comments and other questions from all over the world. But the truth is that Africa has the capability to feed itself, and has the capability to feed and contribute to the rest of the world's food security. And I must add that without food security, there's no other security you can make. Because imagine, can you send troops to Iraq? Can you send troops to Afghanistan? Can you send peacekeeping missions to Sudan without food? You can't. So food is strategic. even to maintain schools, to keep children in classes without food. Can you do so? Well, even this meeting today, we started with food. Didn't we? Because so I would like to conclude by saying and underscoring that the African Food Basket Initiative is a pragmatic approach to the seemingly perpetual food shortage problem in Africa and the rest of the world. It is also anchored on the firm belief and conviction that working together collectively, both African countries and the rest of the world, we can significantly produce enough food for everyone. The African Food Basket is a new battle cry for change. We are challenging the African heads of state. We are challenging the heads of state of the G8. We are challenging the OECD countries to say, look, why do we continue to suffer because we don't have food when, in fact, we have the means to produce the food? I'm very convinced, and I'm a firm believer, that it is time for us to act globally to end world food shortages and escalating world prices. Africa is crying for change. Africans want change. Africans want a new beginning. Africans want to stand up and be counted with the rest of the world. I am privileged to be part of that voice. Thank you. God bless you.
Mr. President, on behalf of all of us who are gathered in this place and in similar places around the world, I would be so presumptuous to speak for us all and say how much we appreciate that very lucid, poignant, and powerful, powerful presentation. Thank you very much. We'll now open for questions. We're going to begin with the first question here at Boston University.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency. My name is Rachel Hawks. I'm a senior here at Boston University studying international relations and French, focusing on Africa and environment and development. Your food and agriculture plans include subsidies on fertilizers, improved seeds, pesticides, tractors and irrigation equipment, extension services, and marketing. What are your thoughts on GMOs in terms of food production?
What is your opinion on GMO relative to food production?
Okay. All right. Do I answer the minute? Well, GMO, we have always, it's a controversial issue, you know, about GMO. And many countries do speak against GMO. And, but I think we have GMO everywhere. I mean, if you see a grape that's bigger than a standard grape, what has happened? It's GMO. It's been genetically modified. You see a potato. You know, normally you have a certain size of potato, but if you see a potato this size, something has happened. So this happens all the time. And maybe we just need to find out how to deal with it. But anyway, coming straight to your question, while we are looking at chemical fertilizers, by the way, when you apply chemical fertilizers to a seed, you're actually genetically modifying it. Because ordinarily, without fertilizer, it will yield only so much. But when you add chemical fertilizers, you get more. You have genetically modified. Think about it. We are in Malawi trying to go back as much as possible to introduce manure, using cow dung and other things, and humus, compost, and there are movements now, very strong movements, that are doing exactly that. The reason being that when you apply chemical fertilizers for a long time, the soil loses its fertility, and it literally dies out because it cannot survive without fertilizers. And we are trying to bring it back. So I don't have a strong view of GMO or against genetically modified products, because if I did that, I probably will have no lunch, because my tomatoes will be genetically modified, everything else. So in a way, you simply say, let sleeping dogs lie.
Morehouse College, let us hear from you, please.
Thank you, Ambassador Stith. First, I would like to extend a special thank you to the Ambassador Stith for both putting this event together and our recent roundtable discussion in Tanzania. Also, on behalf of President Robert Michael Franklin, 10th President of Morehouse College, and the Leadership Center at Morehouse College, Dr. Melvina King and Dr. Preston King, we are honored to take part in today's discussion. My name is Jacques-Éric Pop. I'm a senior at Morehouse College, International Studies and Physics major from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And my question today for Your Excellency, Dr. Mutharika, on the issues of subsidies that you've so talked about, how do you foresee the creation of subsidies for small African farmers being implemented on a regional level, given that if it's done effectively, they can produce, as you mentioned, surpluses that can be transferred to all parts of Africa and eventually the world? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I see that as the way out initially, because as I've said, a lot of food production in Africa is not really done by huge commercial farmers. In Malawi, for instance, we are able to feed ourselves largely from farmers with farm holdings of maybe less than sometimes a hectare. So therefore, you have to deal with these people up to a certain level where they can perhaps begin to consolidate. And the subsidies will still have to be done. And at the moment, we are receiving delegations from many African countries almost every month who are coming to see how best we can apply the subsidies program to improve the food security. By the way, as you have rightly pointed out, this is not only providing fertilizers, but improved seeds. We have found out that by accessing farmers to improved seeds, actually their yields come out much better. But also better farming methods, irrigation methods, extension services. We have recruited a number of people, and we will continue to recruit a number of agricultural extension workers who go into the villages and show the villagers how to market this. And I think part of intervention is also marketing. One of the biggest challenges of the subsidy program is actually how to market. I can tell you that in Malawi now, my biggest problem is how do I market the maize? We have 1.3 million metric tons of maize surplus over and above what we need, but also storage. And this must be part of the package. If no farmer, any of you who are farmers, no farmer wants to look at a crop after it has been harvested. You don't. You love to look at it in the field, and you admire it and all that, but once you bring it home, you want it to go to the market. So it must go to the market as quickly as possible, and that's part of the extension package. So we are extending this to other African countries to say, let's move. That's why we are looking at food security not only at a national level, but at an African level, but also not only at African level, but at global level. because we will be producing rice, we'll be producing wheat, beans, lentils, and other things for the rest of the world.
Let me, as you know, we have a photo, a video link that is constricted and defined by time. And I do want to get all the questions out. So let me make this suggestion, Mr. President, if I might, that we hear the questions from Elizabeth City, the University of Dar es Salaam, and the University of Ghana, that we take them together and then have you respond thusly. All right, so let us hear from Elizabeth City State University. Your question, please.
ECSU. Push the button. Push the button. Yeah, ECSU.
ECSU, yes. Okay.
Say, can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you. Come on.
Okay. Okay. And strengthening the infrastructure of sustainable food development and food security, what system would you use to encourage more collaboration among farmers in Africa? And is there a model of best practice to use as a guide?
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth City State University. University of Dar es Salaam, your question, please.
Okay. In many African countries, the food supply starts from the village areas where the agriculture activities are performed. But according to the hard and poor life conditions with insufficient tools in agriculture production, these people tend to move from urban areas. So how can the plans reach these local peoples and the situation that can handle to make them stay back and make food productions as Mr. President wished?
Thank you, University of Dar es Salaam. University of Ghana.
Thank you for the opportunity. Mr. President, you made mention of the fact that 10% of arable land in Africa is under cultivation. And for Africa, we can see that there has been a gradual shift from local, communal, and lineage-based property of land to private and state property, which is in a way a disadvantage to certain groups like women and pastoralists who do not have the resources to finance the cost of formal land registration. Now my question is, to what extent are land tenure systems a priority to you as an African leader?
Okay.
Mr. President.
Yes. First of all, we are using I think it's from Elizabeth City University. We are using Malawi as a model for other countries because about 5 or 6 years ago, Malawi was a very, very hungry nation. We used to kneel down as a president. I was required to make a decree, go on my knees, go with a begging bowl and beg throughout the world to feed my people. And of course, when I took over, I said, I will never, ever kneel down to beg for food. So I asked Malawians to say, Malawians, stand up, let us produce our own food. And we did. So I think that we have a proven track record that is possible to turn within a short period any country from a food deficit to a food surplus. So we'll be using Malawi as a model, and as I said before, we are accepting people, experts, and private sector from all over Africa, and indeed from all over the world, if they need be, to come and discuss with them, show them what we can do. Of course, we don't have one size fits all. That never exists. But I think you have the basics, which can be modeled to national strategies. But we are doing that. In Dar es Salaam, from Dar es Salaam University, we asked, what do we do? Particularly, you are saying, how do we make sure that we keep the farmers in agriculture by providing them the means of livelihood? That is actually a basic issue. In many countries, when there's famine, or even because of poverty, there's a lot of migration from the urban to rural, from rural to urban areas. And we are trying in Malawi, we are intervening this in several ways. First of all, we are developing what we call growth centers in rural areas. Each growth center will make sure that it has a road, it has electricity, it has a bank, it has a school, it has a hospital, it has a shopping center. The kind of things people look for in towns. And these growth centers are used as marketing outlets for the farmers. Secondly, we have introduced several loans. We have a Malawi Rural Development Fund, which we give to many people, particularly women, without any collateral. And you'll be surprised that we have almost 90% recovery rate without any collateral. So, again, to enable people to stay in the rural areas, because they go into town thinking I can get money for capital, but we are saying staying there. We have also one village, one product concept, which is funded by the Japanese government, where people in a certain area growing, for instance, tomatoes, are enabled to have a factory on their own, owned by themselves, and they can convert tomatoes into puree and other things. We do that with in the pineapples, anything. So these are some of the practical tools that we are using to keep the people in the rural areas. Recently, I established a fund, a 3 billion Malawi Kwacha fund for the youth, which we call Youth Enterprise Development Fund. And many of these youth live in rural areas. So we ask them, stay there, you can manufacture something there, and we are making roads, a lot of roads, to link the rural areas with the urban areas, so that some of their produce can find a way into the market. But the bottom line is that you cannot have a system where you encourage people to leave the rural areas and get into urban areas, because then you get congestion, and there are a lot of social problems. No schools, no hospitals, crime, etc., etc. But if you spread the development, you find that that pressure doesn't come in. As a result, you also reduce crime. So that's a good question. So we do give them the means for them to stay in the rural areas. The question from Ghana was talking about the availability of arable land vis-a-vis the commercialization of private land. In fact, the land tenure system is a very, very complicated issue, land tenure system. And in many countries, they have decrees to say nobody or no foreigners should own land, and that the land should be distributed to the local people. This is a very, very sensitive issue. But it's an issue that has to be dealt with. What do you do to make sure that the ordinary, sometimes we call peasant farmers, they have land? Because how do you grow? I mean, if you give somebody fertilizers, you give them somebody improved seeds and everything else, and has no land where to grow the maize, it doesn't help. So these must go together as a package. And we are looking at it in Malawi. Malawi is a very small country, but we have that problem. And I'm sure many other countries, including Ghana, you meet the same problem where we don't have much land, but we have to deal with it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. As I said, as we coupled those questions, that we are bound to some extent by constraints of time because of the hookup. We also have students who have a class schedule to maintain, and we don't want anybody missing class, do we? So we're going to wrap up one portion of this program, but I do want to say that as we come to the end of what is an amazing day, after having heard an amazing and insightful presentation by one of Africa's and the world's most amazing leaders, oh, what a time we've had. I want to thank President Mutharika, his lovely wife, his cabinet for being with us, the Malawians who've come from far and near to hear you, Mr. President. I want to thank our colleagues and counterparts from the University of Ghana, the University of Dar es Salaam, Elizabeth State University, Morehouse College, for their participation. And last and by no means least, I want to thank those of you who've gathered here in Boston, our colleagues and students at Boston University, for your participation in this amazing program today. So let us give ourselves a rousing round of applause. And can we hear it again for President Professor Bingu Mutharika? Awesome. Happy to be Boba.